Hi, and welcome back to Behind the Meter, an MPSC podcast, where we bring you timely conversations about Michigan's energy and telecommunications system. I'm Mike Byrne, and today we're diving into a growing concern for utility customers across the state, utility scams. From fake phone calls demanding immediate payment to imposters showing up at your door, scammers are getting more sophisticated and more aggressive, but knowledge is your best defense. Joining us is Commission Chair and frequent guest, Dan Scripps. Hi, Dan.
Hi, Mike.
Welcome back.
Thank you.
We're also joined by Monica Martinez, a nationally recognized expert on utility scams and consumer protection, and also a former member of the Michigan Public Service Commission. Monica will break down the latest scam tactics, how to spot the red flags, and what steps you can take to protect yourself, your family, and your community. Hello, Monica. How are you?
Hi, Mike. Thank you so much for having me. This is great to be here.
Thanks for being here. Maybe we can start out by you just telling us a little bit about your background and what you're doing now as it relates to monitoring utility scams.
Absolutely. Having worked in and around the state and in the national sector, looking at consumer protection, really focusing on how we can help individuals protect themselves, work with many trade groups and associations and coalitions throughout the last, 2 decades. Really just striving to figure out different ways that we can help make sure that people are protected and that they have access to essential utility services. Those are the key, and that's what I've been doing and working on that.
That's great. We're glad to have you today. So let's just jump right into the conversation. Maybe we can start out at a high level. What is a utility scam and how common are they?
Utility scams are fairly common. We hear stories every day, and I think probably for all of us, we're hit with so many scams, whether it's via texting, on email, phone calls, people, like as you mentioned, knocking at the door. I mean, there are scams all the time. I think we see the highlighted ones. I think you get them and people are trying to, have you click on a link or tell you that you're overdue on payments, or, the latest one in Michigan and everywhere else around the country is the toll scam. I mean, we see those all the time. The utility scams are just as prevalent. And as you can imagine, people, scammers are out there, impersonating utilities or government agencies or charitable organizations, letting them know that, that they want access to their information, giving that information up, and it just makes everyone vulnerable, no matter who they are.
It's one of the things that I was surprised as I got into this role and being around the industry, just how common they are. And it seems like it's that old sort of, why do you rob banks? Well, that's where the money is. And everybody has utility service. It's one of the things. It is universal service. It's something that we spend a lot of time thinking about. And as a result, everybody has that utility bill that's due. And so if you can find a way to make it look like you're the utility and people want to avoid obviously having their service shut off, it is one of the things that feels like it's sort of low-hanging fruit if you're a scammer to go after a bill that literally everybody has.
That's true. And, when you look at what, people who are impacted, it's not only household customers, residential customers, but it's also business customers. We all want the lights on, right? We all want, I know you don't ventilate water, but we all want the water to run, right? These are the utilities, gas, utility, everything is impacted because we want those essential services on. No one wants to risk being shut off. And if you're getting that phone call, and you're going to have that family picnic, and we always say around the holidays are one of those prime times, or, for a small business, around the lunch hour. When people are, busy doing other things and they're like, oh my gosh, I have to keep the lights on. Did someone not pay the bill? Or did my bill not go through? That's just the prime circumstances for catching folks off guard into thinking that they've missed a payment or they need to disclose information. And, we're all at risk.
Yeah, that's tough. You're sort of exploiting, the potential for fear or vulnerability to be there. So as people are thinking about this, what are the most common utility scam tactics that are used today? What should people be on the lookout for?
People should be on the lookout for being pressured or bullied. What tends to happen is that if they receive the text or the email or any type of notification, that communication is usually pressuring somebody to do something immediately. And they start to badger them. If you don't do this, you will lose that essential service. If you don't act and give me that information, I'm not going to be able to complete or verify your prior transaction. So it's those pieces that are really that bullying and badgering. If they were to happen to show up at your door, I absolutely need this. I need payment right now to check this, or I need payment right now to do this. Those are the typical signs. Most utilities are not going out there wanting something that requires immediate payment, or are asking for information like your social security number, your bank account information, your credit card information. They're not calling, usually asking for that type of information.
Yeah, it's the kind of thing where if you have a gut feeling that this just feels off, that's probably the biggest clue that it is. That is this the way that your utility usually interacts with you? Is this the kind of thing that you often have in those interactions? And if it's not, it's worth taking a second and just, why does this feel off? Or calling your utility. I guess maybe one of the things is, how do people know? What can they do to check whether this is legitimate? And sometimes it's as easy as just, let me call you. I have the number for my utility. Let me call you, and we'll take it from there. And then you know who you're talking to. But what are some other ways that people can verify whether this is a legitimate interaction with their utility or something else?
Dan, you hit it right on. I mean, people need to pause, stop, shut the door. And those are the key things. I mean, I think sometimes people are too kind and too nice. We're here in the Midwest, we're in Michigan. We don't want to be rude to anybody. And so very often it's really just taking your time and saying, you know what, I'll need to call you back. And, or I need to shut the door and I need to verify. With those things, the people really should just take the moment, say, okay, fine, gather whatever information if they need to, but really just stop and then look at their bill. Or if they're logged on via the app or a verified website, make sure that they have the utility number to go ahead and actually call that verified number. I really want to make that distinction because, scammers are either giving you a number that is inaccurate to call. It's not the utility number. It's their own scammer hotline, so to speak, where they're going to, engage in more fraudulent practices. But, you really want that verified information. So do everything you can to verify the information that is legitimate. So look at your bill, look at your app, and look at the verified website for that number to call back and figure out if it's the real deal.
Yeah, that seems to be part of the MO of some of these scammers that, you talked about sort of the pressure and trying to get somebody to do something in the moment, but also trying to mimic, I guess, what might seem to be legitimate in terms of a phone number or a website or those types of things. So can you talk a little bit about, in addition to sort of finding the right utility number and making that call, are there other things that customers should be aware of, especially when you're thinking about like a text message or an email and the kind of links that are involved there?
Yeah, I mean, really with those things, just be wary of anything. First, as you know, the MPSC has certain standards and protocols for shut-off notices and shut-off requirements. So if you're not receiving multiple notices via the verified channels, usually that'll come in mail, it might come on your app and let you know. Those are the verified ways and means. And it's usually just not the first time that you're hearing about it that you're going to be shut off. So I think as much as they can, just follow those things and say, this just seems odd in the first place because how come I wasn't notified already about something? So those are the main protocols there. But I think as well as you're mentioning, the information that comes in, the links can seem real. And so, as you're looking at it and if the information's coming through and you're receiving that text message, I would say do not respond or click on the link in the text message. Go ahead and look through your other information. A lot of times people are using, spoofing numbers, doing other items on whether it's text messages or emails, and those are not accurate. And they can be hard to tell because, as you're saying, they are impersonating the utility. Many times they are doing a recording of the actual phone call that's taking place. They might have the same kind of hold music. They might have the same tone and just copying what the real communication would normally be. And that's where we are being placed at greater risk today with technology, with other items. And as you're talking about, Mike, them being more sophisticated, it's really getting hard to distinguish. So look at the URL, see if it's the same information that you see on your bill. Do a web search, but if you do, try to make sure that it's the verified website. And I do want to touch on that because last year we had a lot of search engine scams. Okay. And those were items where individuals were falsifying or faking or saying, this is how do you pay, a utility bill. We had this happen with many utilities across the country, out in California, Florida, North Carolina, other locations, and they were purchasing ads on many of the search engines. And those were rising to the top. So if someone was, entering their information in, not to point out Google or anything like that, but if they were Googling it, they were saying, my utility company or my whatever your company's name is, entering it in. And the first one that would pop up was actually the scammer information. So one of the things that I think for all entities who are in this space, utilities, Public Service Commission itself, agencies who help individuals with bill payments or anything like that, they should do a periodic check on the internet. Just how are their searches coming up? Is there something that is trying to pretend to be them? And then usually there can be some action to help take that down. But we did, we worked with, a lot of the search engines to try to mitigate that. But that doesn't mean that risk isn't still there. And so just verifying that because, you might think you're getting the real deal and you're not.
That's amazing. But it's also, I think, indicative of what you said before, that things are much more sophisticated than they used to be. It felt like even 5 years ago that, you'd get something and maybe it would have the utilities logo cut and pasted on or something, but it would often have a lot of spelling errors. The language wasn't exactly right. And there were sort of giveaways or tells. And, with AI and other things, it feels much more like you're dealing with the utility company. And so sometimes you don't even get the sense that you're not, but double checking if somebody's, and again, the urgency, if somebody's demanding payment right this minute, if you haven't had previous interactions about being behind or that sort of thing, those are the kinds of things, maybe even more than the sort of format of the communication itself. But I hadn't heard the search engine one. That's a next level.
Yeah. And, but you're right. I mean, I think with AI, those are putting the constraints on it. Now people can just go ahead and ask that information to be formatted. If you would have asked me 5 years ago, I would have told you spelling errors. Look at the salutation. Look at the closing. The image is more grainy. I'm not even talking about that today because it is just so much more realistic and the information is just so much more clear. And those are no longer the major, they are still indicators. Those are the scammers maybe who have not yet caught up to technology today. But for everyone else who, all those scammers who are using AI and a lot of these other informations and tools to mirror and just mimic it's just looking more real and real as we go through that.
So, I mean, that's a really good thing to keep in mind. It's not like you can identify this is the scam, this is the thing to be on the lookout for, and then, okay, we're good. It's not going to happen to us. The scammers themselves are evolving in terms of their techniques, and they're going to keep trying to get people to find ways to part with their money. So what are utilities doing to try to crack down on this, or what are resources that might be out there for people to be able to kind of stay abreast of the different scams that exist and do the best that they can to protect themselves?
I think the number one defense is education. Education is how we can prevent this. Having the conversations like we're having today, having them with our family and friends, because not everyone is aware. And that goes for the whole generation, from if you're younger to older, having those conversations and not being afraid or shameful to talk about scams. Sometimes when people were scammed, they'd be a little bit, oh God, I was victim. I was vulnerable. You see a lot of older adults who don't want to admit that they've been scammed because maybe that thing, is putting the pressure on them in their lifestyle, and people think that they're not able to handle things. Younger people, we find, are often more ready to talk about it and go ahead and report it. Because, they're online and they go to the FTC's website and they go ahead and report it. To your point of where do you get information, Utilities United Against Scams is one resource. There are booklets and one-pagers and information that really does talk about, the information that is out there, so that you can prevent scams and the different types of utility scams that come up. The Federal Trade Commission as well is a good partner on that. They, on an annual basis, hold information and hold, a Consumer Protection Awareness Week just generally. And you start to see where those scams are evolving from other types of industries. I mean, utilities are not the only ones faced with this. Government agencies are faced with this. So you start to see what those trends are ahead of time. But the message is generally the same for all of them. And so you'll just go ahead and get those information there. State Attorney General, I know Attorney General Nessel, she has a Consumer Protection Division. And so all of those are sending out good information and that can be utilized for that. So those are some of the prime resources. And I know you all put out information as well. And getting that information, learning the different pieces that are out there can really help. And there's, of course, a lot of other national groups that are involved in that and nonprofit organizations that do engage and help protect customers by giving that information.
You mentioned earlier some of the search optimization thing is obviously staying with me, but texts, what are maybe some of the most egregious examples or the slickest examples that you've seen in terms of things that really stood out to you as an expert in this?
Yeah, people will go ahead and send, the text message now with a QR code. So they're using QR codes, other information, and saying, here, this is what it is. We need you to do this information, and go ahead and send it in. Some of the other things that we do find that scammers are doing are calling the utility, posing as a customer. And unfortunately, on the other end, they actually have the real customer on hold on the other line. And then they're soliciting the information from them to follow through. And at the same time, they're getting customer information, maybe saying, I want to change some information on my customer account. And we've had our utilities or other members, look at that, and there's maybe a pause. And so the utilities are moving and saying, oh, this just doesn't sound like a normal situation. It doesn't sound like a normal call-in. There's somebody on the other line. And of course, utilities are very good at watching out for things like, vulnerable adult abuse and things like that. And so they're heightened to that, where you might have sort of that three-way communication, a real customer, the scammer, and the utility, and kind of catching it for that, because they could be sharing sensitive information along, gaining access to it, or telling the other person, well, give me your information, maybe make a small payment on the account to make it look like it was legitimate, but then subsequently going and using that customer's account information for identity theft, or having them pay or deposit something to a fraudulent account. And so there's a lot of, slick ways that they're dealing with that. And that, people have hard-earned money that they don't really have extra money to let go. And I think that's one of the greatest risks, is that depending on how they're paying or making those payments, people are usually paying out of a bank account. Sometimes they're using credit cards or other things, but payment out of the bank account and then it's gone. And that can be an issue. I know the Utilities United Against Scams has worked with Zelle and others in the financial industry to try to figure out ways that they can make sure that they're notifying individuals, is this payment going to a utility payment? Be careful. This may be fraudulent, so that there's that check mark and someone's, again, doing that pause or that stop to double check. But it's scary how much they have immersed themselves into so many different sources and avenues to reach us.
Yeah, that is, it's pretty mind-blowing to hear about the different ways that the folks can go about doing this. So I think this has been a great conversation. I also think it's one where, we'll probably get a chance to do it again, because it sounds like, these techniques continue to get more sophisticated, and we'll always want to be talking about to customers about protecting their money and their information. I guess I would love to maybe just, if you have any points to leave us with, or maybe just to reinforce in terms of what customers can be doing to stay on the lookout. It just any thoughts to kind of close us out.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, keep in mind, this is over a $3 billion problem, impersonations, that even the FTC saw numbers in terms of reports, which means that the problem is probably even larger than that. For customers, really, if you're getting a call or an inquiry about, being at risk, if you're feeling bullied or being pressured into something, pause, stop, and then go ahead and call back the utility with verified information. Do all of those things to do that double check. And it's okay to do that. Take your time above anything else, because it's your information that is potentially at risk. And doing that double check, there's no harm in it. Somebody wants to be called back, they will go ahead and be called back. The other thing is to go ahead and report it and talk to your family about it and friends. Go ahead and report it, whether that's to the Public Service Commission, to the utility themselves, in many cases, and to the Federal Trade Commission. But in many cases, going ahead and making that reporting lets individuals know what's happening. And it can depict whether or not that is a recent scammer issue. Because when scammers are out there, we find a lot of times that they're targeting certain geographic areas at a time, or certain utility customers at a time. So if it's happening to you, it's happening to other individuals. So sometimes it's just useful for the reporting to happen, so that we might be able to put out, consumer information that we're seeing an uptick in these type of trends right now beyond special alert.
Yeah.
So.
Well, really appreciate this conversation today. Incredibly timely issue. Monica, thank you for being here. Chair Scripps, thanks for your participation as well. A number of resources were talked about today, so we'll make sure that we link to the Utilities United Against Scams information, the FTC, the Michigan Attorney General, and then the Public Service Commission's own resources. But thanks again to all of you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you again behind the meter.